Wonderful. Good morning, Lauren.
Hi, good morning.
Awesome. Well, I think that we have lots of people ready to hear from us. So we will dig in. But first of all, we're so excited to have Lauren with us. I first heard Lauren speak at PsyOp back in October, and she told me then that she'd love to have a microphone. And I am honored to be giving her the Valence microphone this morning. I'll very quickly introduce myself, and then we will pass it over to our guest of honor. For anyone on the call that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Alex McMurray, part of the founding team here at Valence. So for the past 7 years, I have been thinking about how do we democratize the experiences that our top leaders have and bring that lower down in the house through technology. So initially through standard SaaS, and in the last 2 years, I've been so lucky to spend my days talking to HR executives about how they use generative AI to support their leaders. I lead sales here at Valence, and had the pleasure of meeting Lauren when her organization decided to move forward with Nadia, our AI coach. So Lauren has just wrapped up a 9-year career in the advertising industry at VML. She started there when they were still young and Rubicam, went through the Wonderman phase and all the way through to the massive umbrella of WPP. Throughout that time, had multiple HR executive roles and led many strategic initiatives, including the transformation of the Center of Excellence for the learning practice. Part of why we're so excited to have Lauren is that she comes from also a psychology background. So social psychology, moving into workplace psychology. And I know a lot of you are from the IO background, and very excited for her to bring those insights and perspectives to all of you. Lauren's a big influencer in the space. I know a lot of you follow her newsletter, and we'll be digging into some of her most recent insights as well. And interestingly, Lauren is also an entrepreneur and runs a boutique wellness pharmacy, and we'll also talk about how AI is transforming that industry. So without further ado, Lauren, if I missed anything in your intro, let me know.
No, I think you got it.
Awesome. Well, given your background, I wanted to start off by asking you, how do you see people responding to AI generally? You've been thinking about this for a while now, and would love to understand that.
Yeah. The psychologist in me is loving all of the reactions and sort of how quickly the narrative is changing. I'm staying really closely attuned to just social media and the narratives and the noise and everything going on. This week was a big one. I think, generally it's not that much different from the general sorts of archetypes and categories that we would see people fall into, from the early adopters, people that are just chomping at the bit when there's a new bell and whistle, they're the first ones to be in there, all the way to kind of the skeptics, right? I think there's a couple of things, though, that are markedly different from me. I think within my lifetime, at least, the closest kind of comparable event was the internet, right? Like 90s going into the 2000s, and remembering how people reacted to that and comparing. I think one thing that stands out to me with AI, is the amount of active resistors. I'm finding there's a lot more folks that are really kind of in the doomsday camp and kind of digging their heels a little bit. There's feels, maybe they're just louder because now we have social media, but I feel like there's a bit more. And even folks that are sort of leading voices in AI, even they will introduce and kind of warn a little bit of just kind of a, cautious tone of, we don't know where this is going. We don't know what, I think AI introduces so many things that are out of the framework of what we know and understand, that all of us are sort of grappling to predict what it means. So even across the board, even to the early adopters, there's a little level of skepticism there, which I think is good, right? But those are the kinds of things that stand out to me right now.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And I think like that kind of fear reaction is more outsized than when you're trying to do another different initiative in an enterprise. The other thing that I have been observing is that the pace of change from people moving to resistor to adopter is actually really tight. We've been in the marketplace for a year and a half, and I have just seen the speed. And I'm curious if you've also experienced that and why you think that speed of kind of like evolution along the arc is so much faster when we're talking about AI.
Yeah, it does seem to be really quick. I was actually just reading through. So VML every year puts out this Future 100 report. It's phenomenal. If you all haven't checked it out, go online, Google VML Future 100, download the report. It's insights just on sort of the state of the world. And it's really well done. And I was just reading through it, and it was it's basically a survey about 4,000 adults, 14 different countries. And about 53% were already saying that they were actively using AI for writing, and about 40+% were already using it for things like social media and creating images, which shocked me. I didn't think it was that high of folks that were already using it that actively. I think it's because the evolution is happening so quickly, and there's so much noise, in social media and in the news, that folks are scared to miss out on the boat. They're like, I better jump in on this before it's too late. So I think that has something to do with it.
And just for everyone on the webinar, Loren was actually an active partner of rolling out Valence's AI coach at VML. And so one of the questions I have is, as you had to meet those resistors and the people who had a lot of fear in the workplace, kind of like what were the tactics, and how did you listen and help those people feel safe to experiment?
Yeah. And it's still very much in the works. I mean, that's going to be an evolution. The thing with change overall is you can't grab and forcibly take people through that change curve. You have to just sort of incentivize them. There's this quote that I love, and I don't know where I heard it, but I didn't make it up, but it's a great one, that it says, you can't tell people what to do, you need to inspire them what to do. Right. And that very much applies to the adoption and sort of receptivity of folks. You can't force it. You have to just sort of pave the road and make it easier for them to want to come along. And so that's really where we were focusing our efforts in terms of communication and, finding internal influencers, those early adopters that were excited, that were ready to champion it, have them be the voice, have the message not come from HR, right, but rather from peers, have those people kind of speak out on our behalf and just show the benefit, right? Remove kind of the perceived threats. I always say that folks are only resistant to things that are a threat to either convenience or ego, are the kind of the two big ones. If you can sort of eliminate those, then people come along a bit more quickly.
I love that. The other threat that sometimes people bring up when they're talking about AI in the workplace is like, who might be reading this and how might this be used against me? And I wonder if you heard any of that and how you kind of met that objection.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so glad that you brought that one up, because that was a big one. It's interesting, you hear folks in general with the use of any technology, there's a little bit of a tension between folks really sharing every aspect of their life pretty openly across the internet, but then at the same time saying, well, but I want to do that under my control, right? I want to pick and choose what people see and what they have access to. And they're really careful about, kind of their privacy on the other hand. So that very much was, I don't know if it was yet an express concern, but it was something that we got ahead of in the implementation. So we did things like in our communications, we made it very clear that, this is a separate platform. We don't have ownership to it. We don't have the ability to access what you're saying. So we made it really clear in what we were saying. We had sort of a notification bubble that would pop up that your team helped us enable when folks went into the platform. And even the sort of the design of the user journey, meaning so the link was found maybe on our internal native platforms, but then they physically saw a new separate window pop up that was very evidently taking them somewhere else. That kind of was that psychological kind of, notice that, okay, I'm leaving the VML or my company's environment and going somewhere else. So that helped as well.
Awesome. On the same vein of, you said you have to inspire people to want to try something new. The other word we can use for that is influenced. And one of the things I heard you talk about on the stage at PsyOp was that, we are in an era of influencer marketing. The biggest part of the workforce right now is, for the first time, boomers are a minority, millennials, Gen X and Gen Z. And this group is used to being influenced. And so how have you taken those principles from normal marketing and applied them to rolling out software in your organization?
Yeah. So, let's talk a minute kind of on what underlies why influencer marketing is so
Yeah.
powerful, right? And was so powerful. I think as humans, we innately have a reaction to be when we feel we're being sold to, right? There's an immediate resistance, which is why we kind of cringe at the thought of going to like, a car dealership, because immediately you step out of the car and you're swarmed by these people kind of pushing, right? So we don't like that. We like to feel that what we're deciding is sort of intrinsically right. Like we went through the process ourselves and it was a process of discovery and we made the decision. So when the world kind of got fed up with traditional advertising, right, we're being sold at, and then this novel thing came about of influencers, which were folks that we felt we knew, so actually part of the VML report, they asked survey respondents, to what degree do you feel connected to influencers or folks in social media that you don't know? And I think it was something like almost 70% of Gen Z said, I actually feel a connection. I feel like these people are my friends. I feel that I trust them, right? So because of that, right, word of mouth has always been the most powerful kind of way of getting people on board. And so now this word of mouth through these influencers is really powerful. But what we found was that we had folks within our organization, right, that I used to call them influencers because I was in a learning capacity at the time. And these were folks that just naturally had a gravitas. People love to hear from them, right? People love to hear what they had to say. They valued their opinions. And those were the folks that we started tapping to kind of help evangelize our messages. And only when like it was organic, right? It wasn't because folks are really quick to pick up when things are performative or not genuine or authentic. So it had to be a natural. We would look for people that were already naturally, organically connected to what we were trying to do. And then we would tap them.
Cool. Thank you. And I mean, it's so true. Like as I talk to other organizations that are trying to put new ideas like Nadia into the hands of people, the old, a note just from the CEO does not have the same impact it had, 10 years ago. So thank you. Another kind of trend that I've noticed as I've been talking to people about the concept of AI coaching in the workplace is people asking me, well, is this the same as an EAP, an employee assistance platform? And how is this different than going to therapy that we pay for through health benefits? And one of the things that I've been sharing with clients that I think is actually analogous to how these generations want to be marketed to is that they don't have the same distinctions around the kinds of conversations they have that help them. If it's a conversation that's helping them grow, it's probably going to flow into things that are personal to them. It's going to bring in things around their family and work. And so I'm just curious how you think about how you meet this new generation at work with all of the different supports that organizations have typically offered.
Yeah, no, you really nailed it. It's not compartmentalized anymore. And in fact, if you talk to leaders or anyone that has a sort of people management responsibility today, one of the biggest challenges that they feel is this expectation or, that their folks are coming to them with much more personal situations and circumstances and an expectation of those things being accommodated or dealt with or whatever in the workplace, where I think prior there was a very stark line between this is a home problem and then this is a work problem. And now it's sort of all merging together, both psychologically and physically. So yeah, I think that folks really aren't looking for those distinctions. They just want something to help. And when you ask folks today, sort of what is it that they're seeking more of in life? Number one response is personal growth, right? People are really looking for that, regardless of where it comes from, what shape or form, right? That's just kind of top of mind. And any tool that is going to help them accomplish that, they're going to really greatly value.
Yeah. And I think that we've never had the opportunity to help people grow on their own time frame in their own moment of need, as we have with these AI applications. Be it AI coaching, be it AI therapy. There's all of a sudden this opportunity to really meet people in their moments of challenge their moments of pain, and that is where growth happens. And so I do think we're going to see people, whether it's leaders, whether it's individual contributors, or just as humans, actually able to kind of grow more than we ever have been before. So it's interesting. We always talk about how is AI going to, replace the human? Is this going to replace human coaching and among many, many other jobs? But I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that AI is also helping us as humans become better and more powerful at what we do. So again, I think we're just in this like fascinating moment.
No, we really are. And I think one of the big things around, I mean, the conversation about replacing, I know that it's always scary to think about replacing a human with a thing. I'm a big fan of thinking about how we're going to augment, right, just human potential through it versus replace. That said, I mean, I can envision a world where to some degree, these kinds of, interactions is replaced, right? I think that the younger generation is becoming more and more comfortable with having those kinds of interactions and getting that kind of support from a non-human, right? From non-humans. Interestingly, I read recently something like 44% of Gen Z, when asked, can you imagine a future where you could actually fall in love with an AI agent or bot? 44% somewhat to strongly agreed that yes, I could imagine that. Right.
Yeah.
Which I was like, wow, but that just shows that there is this open-mindedness, I guess, about to what degree, we're willing to accept kind of non-human agents in our life.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many of those studies that are really fascinating. And when I was reading this A16, a big venture capital organization, I was reading their, top AI products that they use. And interestingly, there was a section with like 5 applications that were geared towards kids. So for kids to have friends, for kids to create stories with. And that was the first time I realized, it's not just places like Valence who are thinking about the adults out there. It's really like the true next generation is going to grow up with so much comfortability around interacting with AI and getting human needs filled with a non-human.
Yeah. What I think too, what we need to look is prior, and let's kind of double click into coaching specifically. When in whether I was in a chief people officer capacity or learning capacity, when I would travel to different markets all around the world, there was 2 things that everyone at all levels, all countries asked for. One was sort of internal mobility, like this idea of like traveling, actually physically traveling to new offices, experiencing new cultures. That was one. The second was coaching. I mean, everyone at all levels wanted coaching, but it used to be this all or nothing, right? It was a very difficult thing to scale. It's very costly, and humans only have, there's only 24 hours in a day, right? So there's only so many folks that were able to act. So now it's opening up access. It's democratizing, right, the ability to get this level of support. So I don't think it's an all or nothing like replacing humans. It's just how is this amplifying and giving more access to folks that traditionally didn't have it.
Absolutely. And I love that you obviously brought up the coaching aspect. And I'd love to hear, what's your personal journey been with AI? So aside from Nadia and Valence, what were your first kind of dipping your toe in the AI waters? How did you start using it? And how did that make you more comfortable to think about bringing an AI coach into your organization?
Yeah. I mean, I think I ventured into, Chat GPT in the first couple of months that it was sort of opened up, which I think it might have been most folks, kind of early usage, putting in a couple easy prompts and then just being like, oh, wow, look at this, right? And then kind of getting more and more complex. And then fast forward, now I've got my own custom GPTs. I've got scheduled tasks that it does for me. And it just keeps evolving, right? As they add more features or as I get more comfortable using it, it's become a more and more a part of my life and kind of my way of work. And with Nadia specifically, it did take some time personally to really understand, like, how do I use this technology? What do I use Nadia for? How do I even start the conversation, right? I found myself sitting in front of the screen, just sort of, she's looking at me, I'm looking at her, like, okay, how do I start this conversation? But once you get going and you see the level of response it's giving you and how helpful it is, it really just opens the floodgates. So it's sort of like jumping into a cold pool, right? Where the initial jump is the hardest part, but once you're in, you're like, this is actually really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Circling back a little bit, we talked about like the apprehension and, needing to be vulnerable to jump into the cold pool. I think like the next horizon that is going to come with many AI applications, but also, as we think about how do we continue to make Nadia more valuable for organizations, is this concept of like sharing. We talked about in personal life, people put a lot of stuff on the internet. And one of the things that we're building is the ability for Nadia to talk to other people's Nadias. So Loren, if you're on my team, my Nadia can advise me how to prep for a conversation with you. I'd love to get your reaction. When I share this with clients, I met with both like great excitement in terms of, oh my gosh, there's so much power here, and huge fear of how can we, have this level of sharing. And I'd just love to get your reaction on how you might think about that kind of thing in a huge enterprise where you have so many archetypes of potential users.
Yeah, I mean, I think depending on how it's carried out, that's going to be a game changer, because if there's two things that are true, one, people love sharing and talking about themselves, and two, people love customization, right? And all the biggest brands in the world right now are embarking on how can we make things feel as bespoke and customized as possible? How can we make our comms and our ad strategy feel like we are talking specifically to this person, right? So I think folks really like that. I think the degree to which, though, they have control maybe over things like settings, right? They can toggle on and off what is shared. That's right. It gives them a sense of kind of perceived control. I think that's really important part of the formula. But once folks see it's again, it's a careful balance where folks really do want things to feel like it was tailor-made for them, but they don't want to relinquish the perceived control behind it. So if we find that careful balance, I think it's going to be really great. I mean, if we if we just look at things like, the reason that things like Spotify Wrapped get so widely shared, the reason that people love to do things like the, MBTI or all of these things, and they go around saying, I'm an ISTP and I'm a, folks do love sharing certain aspects of themselves. Look at my playlist, look at what I love. Or, I know that the early days of the internet, those quizzes were really popular of like, what Disney princess are you? And that, people eat that stuff up. They really do enjoy that level of like sharing a little bit about themselves and their personality. So I think it would gain a lot of traction, that kind of functionality. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's such an exciting horizon, and it's so much about the framing and the education. And that's something else that I've really noticed is that, when, I've been doing this for a while, and with our team effectiveness toolkit and software, people often asked about the validity, like, what's the science that you thought about when building this? But no one really asked, like, how does your software work? Like, what are all the intricacies of that? Of course, like security teams did, but not, the VPs of HR. What I find with AI is that there's this level of curiosity and expectation of education that is really net new. And it's really interesting. And I kind of love it that people are so curious and kind of hold themselves to the bar of truly understanding, like, what is this technology that I'm going to bring into my organization? But I don't know if you've seen that as well in terms of the employees, like your customers, expecting that level of education.
Yeah, I think to some degree, yeah, there is some questioning. What I would caution, though, especially for practitioners that are watching that are really trying to champion this kind of technology being used across the organization, is the sort of reactions and questions that are coming from the folks that you're taking this to make those investments and those decisions may not necessarily reflect the reactions of what you're going to get from the workforce as a whole. I find that, when you look at just the workforce as a whole, there's a lot more receptivity and okayness with things than maybe the initial stakeholders that, so I wouldn't let that serve as a gatekeep to everyone getting the experience.
I love that you just went out and any other like tips that you would say as you are bringing in, and as particularly thinking about the whole HR stakeholder community and how you bring them along on a journey to adopting new technology.
Yeah. For us, you all were really incredible when we were piloting, and really partnering and helping us get those folks to not only to the table, but give them like an active playground to test and feel, because that is always going to be the most powerful sell in getting people on board, right? So it's finding not just the key decision making folks, but also those really influential voices. And again, to my previous point about, show that this is people want this, right? So if you get enough folks to try it and loudly say like we really want this, you can turn around and say, hey, this isn't me, they all really want this, right? So we were able to bring, I think, something like 100 folks into the pilot, and that really was tremendously helpful to gain that proof point of, people are loving this, they're using it, there's ROI here, and we're going to get a lot of value to then bring everyone else on board.
Amazing. That's yeah, I mean, I think that as well, people's just facility with different tools, most people have used some sort of AI application. And so the appetite to get your hands dirty is high with these things. So totally align that it's great to get people the opportunity to try things out. I know we have a couple minutes left. And we have been very rude and not asked our audience if they have any questions or wanted to hear anything specific from Loren. Invite you to drop anything into the chat. But Loren, any kind of final words of wisdom that you would give to other practitioners who are listening to us as we think about, bringing AI to more people?
Yeah. One thing that was really important for us and is going to make all the difference, I think, to adoption is the actual like user interface of the platforms. And we found that Nadia and Valence, it was just, such a high, just a really user friendly, very intuitive. You don't want that to be, when you're introducing new technologies to your workforce, you don't want that to be a big barrier, that it's complicated, that it feels clunky. Especially today, folks really expect things to be, years ago I read this book called One Click about the story of Amazon, and the whole, philosophy there was things have to be very seamless, one click, or you're going to lose people. That's the expectation today. And we found that in Valence is that it was really easy to use. Folks will, when you don't have to spend so much time from an HR learning, just teaching people how to use a thing, and instead you can double down on sort of just more the campaigning and the excitement around it. It's so nice to not have to like, okay, everyone, let's have a training on how to click here and click there. You don't want that, right? So that was one thing we found too, was just the design is so important.